In April 2019, about 3 weeks after Sekiro came out, a mainstream games journalist wrote a piece basically asking, could this game maybe just have an easy mode? Nothing crazy, just an option. That single article set off one of the biggest arguments gaming had that whole year. Steven Spohn, a guy who runs a charity literally dedicated to accessibility in games, went back and forth on Twitter with FromSoftware fans for days. God of War's director weighed in, random people were tweeting "get good" at total strangers like it was scripture. And I want to start there, with the fight, because I think that fight is the reason most people think Sekiro is just the hard one. That's the whole reputation. Hardest FromSoftware game, parry or die. And look, that reputation is earned, but it's also kind of a trap, because if all you take away from Sekiro is it's difficult, you miss what the difficulty's actually for. It's not decoration, it's the entire argument the game is making. Let's actually get into why.
Quick bit of context because it matters. Sekiro is directed by Hidetaka Miyazaki, the same guy behind Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and Bloodborne. Every one of those games, no matter how hard, gave you an escape hatch. In Dark Souls, you raise a shield, you eternal up, you take your time. In Bloodborne, they took the shield away but gave you incredibly generous dodge windows and let you regen health by attacking. There was always a defensive fallback built in. Sekiro removes it entirely. You can hold block, sure, but blocking still chips away at your own stability. There's no safety net version of this game, and the reason is a single new mechanic that changes everything: posture. Every enemy in Sekiro has two bars: a health bar, which you basically ignore for most of the fight, and a posture bar, which is the one that actually matters. You don't wear enemies down by cutting their health to zero. You wear them down by deflecting their attacks at the exact right instant. Not blocking, deflecting. There's a difference. And posture damage stacks up until their guard completely breaks. Once it breaks, you get one hit. One death blow. Instant kill, doesn't matter how much health they had left. Somebody described this really well once. In real life, a sword fight isn't two guys trading hits until one of them runs out of some invisible health meter. In real life, the first clean hit basically ends it. Sekiro built an entire combat system just to make that feel true. You're not grinding someone's HP down, you're hunting for the one moment their guard slips. That's why there's no room for a shield. A shield is a tool for surviving longer. Sekiro isn't interested in you surviving longer. It's interested in you being sharp enough, right now, in this exchange, to win it clean.
Here's the thing critics kept circling back to in 2019. Sekiro doesn't reward being overleveled. There's no build. You can't grind side content until a boss becomes trivial. Miyazaki stripped almost all the traditional RPG scaffolding out on purpose. Your prosthetic arm gets new tools, your attack power ticks up a little, but the game never lets numbers substitute for skill. When you eventually beat Genichiro, or Owl, or, God help you, Ishin at the very end, it's not because a stat bar tipped in your favor. It's because you, personally, got better at reading a specific rhythm of attacks and reacting to them. And that's actually the argument FromSoftware kept making back to the add an easy mode crowd, whether people liked hearing it or not. The entire emotional payoff of the game is manufactured by the difficulty. Take away the difficulty, and you haven't made the game more accessible, you've kind of made it a different game, because the thing players were responding to wasn't cool sword fighting, it was the specific feeling of getting wrecked by the same boss for 2 hours and then finally having it click. There's a real tension in that argument, by the way, and I'm not going to pretend there isn't. Plenty of thoughtful people, including accessibility advocates, pointed out that just get good doesn't work the same way for someone with a physical disability that makes split-second reaction inputs genuinely impossible, no matter how much they practice. That's a real, legitimate problem, and it's one the entire industry is still figuring out. But it's worth separating from the specific design question of why Sekiro is built this way. It's not difficulty for a badge on your Steam profile. It's difficulty because the game's core thesis, mastery earned through repetition, not stats bought through grinding, literally cannot exist without it.
Okay, this is the part of the video I actually think is the most interesting, and it barely comes up when people talk about Sekiro. You can resurrect. Right there in combat, if you have a charge available, you can die and come back on the spot instead of restarting from your last checkpoint. On paper, that sounds like FromSoftware giving you a cushion. a little bit of mercy. Except the game immediately tells you this power has a cost, and the cost isn't paid by you. It's paid by everyone around you. Every time you use your resurrection ability, there's a chance that NPCs you've talked to, actual named characters in the world, the merchant, the old woman by the well, catch something called dragon rot. It's framed as a sickness. Their dialogue changes. Some quest lines quietly break. It's not fatal, and it's reversible if you're diligent, but the point lands regardless. Cheating death is not free. Somebody else in this world absorbs the bill for you refusing to stay down. And once you know that, the whole story reframes itself. The entire plot of Sekiro is about a bloodline that grants immortality, and every single person who goes looking for that immortality, Genji Nero, Owl, Ishin in his own way, ends up worse for it. Genji Nero drinks corrupting water to get an edge, and it slowly destroys him. The whole political war in the story is different factions trying to seize immortality by force. And your own gameplay mechanic, the resurrection you're using every 10 minutes without thinking twice about it, is quietly reinforcing the exact same idea the story's spending 30 hours telling you. Living forever isn't a gift. It's a debt, and somebody always pays it. That's not filler. That's a studio building a rule into the moment-to-moment gameplay that argues the same thing as the narrative. Most games don't bother lining those up. Sekiro does it so quietly, most players finish the game without ever clocking it consciously. They just feel a low-grade guilt every time Dragon Rot pops up, without necessarily connecting why.
Both, honestly. Sekiro won Game of the Year at the Game Awards in December 2019, beating out a stacked field that included God of War tier competition that year. It sold 2 million copies in its first 10 days, which at the time made it FromSoftware's fastest-selling game ever, well ahead of any previous Dark Souls launch. By 2023, it had crossed 10 million copies worldwide. Smaller than Elden Ring's numbers, sure, but Elden Ring is an open-world game built to be approachable in a way Sekiro deliberately isn't. For a game this unwilling to compromise, 10 million is enormous. And it's still being talked about like it's unfinished business. There's an anime adaptation, Sekiro No Defeat, that was announced in 2025 for a 2026 release. Hand-drawn, not CG, which tells you the people making it understand what made the original feel the way it did.
So here's my case. Calling Sekiro the difficult one isn't wrong, but it's incomplete in the same way calling a katana the sharp one is incomplete. The sharpness isn't decoration, it's the entire design. Sekiro is difficult on purpose in a very specific shape, because that difficulty is the delivery mechanism for everything else it's trying to do. A combat system built around the honesty of a real duel, a mastery curve that can't be bought with stats, and a resurrection mechanic that's quietly making the same argument as its story. That immortality, cheating death, refusing to stay down, none of it is free. The difficulty was never the whole point. It was just the most visible part of a much better argument underneath it.